Sippers, welcome to this episode of the Tea With Me podcast with me, your good friend Shane Todd. Before we get stuck into this, let me plug the Patreon, patreon.com/teawithmepodcast, where, of course, you don't know, I'm doing a daily breakfast podcast every morning. It's called Breakfast Brew. They're sort of 20-minute episodes of me in my dressing gown, in my actual kitchen. Be so weird if we invested in a set that was just a working kitchen instead of just doing it in my actual kitchen. We're speaking to different people. It's rants. It's different things. They're very fun episodes, and you can get them if you sign up to the Patreon. Patreon.com/teawithmepodcast. And the bonus episodes, of course, of this podcast go out there every Monday. My special from last year or from 2019. From the Waterfront Hall is also on there, so yeah, you can check that out and join the Patreon, become a big sipper. There's a guest episode today. My guest is Yannis Pappas, who is one half of the History Hyenas, which is my favourite podcast. And you know it's my favourite podcast because towards the end of this podcast, I start telling Yannis how much I like the podcast. And then I worry that I'm overdoing it and I try and act cool, but I can't because I'm such a big fan. I discovered that podcast about a year and a half ago, and it's the only one that I've never... I dip in and out of some of them. It's the only one that I've never missed an episode of. So we get into it and we chat about stand-up and J.K. Rowling and and potatoes, a lot of different things. There's a mistaken identity at the start of the podcast, which is a lot of fun as well. And Yannis, just very, very funny guy, very interesting guy. And I was just chuffed that he agreed to do the podcast. So we had a real good time doing that. And we've got loads of guest episodes coming up. They're going to be over Zoom. And it's people that probably because of lockdown, we've got these people because of lockdown. In normal situation, we probably wouldn't have been able to get them. So part of me is like, yeah, let's get COVID kicked out, let's get it out of here. Let's get the vaccination rolled out. Then another part of me is like, let's slow the vaccination process because the podcast is in a good place. I don't mean that, but I also do. I want everyone to get it, but just not quickly. Like what I would like is if they hid the vaccine in different places. So you had what was that thing called? People went nuts for it, where you got clues as to where you had to go and find something, and it was like a rat.
Pokemon?
Not Pokemon. Geocaching?
Oh yeah.
Remember this?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I want to do with the vaccine. So your 85-year-old granny thinks she's told you're getting the vaccine on Tuesday, but then she just gets a text and of course you got to read it out to her, and she's like, oh, they have to go to the medical centre. It's like, no, you don't go to the medical centre. You've got to think of an old bridge, and then there's some sort of cryptic clue. I would like that because that will really help on the podcast. But yeah, my chat with Yannis was really, really fun. So happy to do the podcast with him, and he does have a special on YouTube as well, which is great. We talk about that, and he's launched his own podcast, a solo podcast called Yanni Long Days as well. This is my podcast with the brilliant Yannis Pappas. Yannis, my first question for all my guests is, and I never know the answer to this with guests in America or anywhere else outside of Ireland, but do you drink tea in the British and Irish sense of tea? Are you a tea drinker? Can I predict your answer? I mean, if I'm honest, I think you look like a guy that doesn't drink tea often, but when he does, it's a loose leaf.
Yeah, no, I'm American. We don't drink tea unless we're sick, we have a sore throat, or we have a fever, and then we think tea cures that somehow. But now I'm getting a phone call, so we're really struggling to get the Zoom call started. But we don't drink tea, and when we do, we think it cures us of COVID. And I'm surprised by that question because you're Scottish, and I thought you would ask me if I drink fucking straight, hard Scottish Scotch, but you drink tea, so that means you're a mellow Scottish kid.
Well, Yannis, we had problems at the start of this with the video on the Zoom. We've got problems now because I'm Irish, I'm not Scottish, and
wait a second, you're Irish?
We have got off on the wrong foot. Now, here's the thing: I'm from Northern Ireland, so it's Northern Ireland. Yes, I'm Irish, but it's
you're a pikey.
Well, I've been called worse for sure.
Wait, I'm kidding. So is pikey a bad thing?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if you said it to one of the, I don't really know what they are exactly. I think it's like it's a term that was maybe used for travelers, maybe. So I think if you say it to one of those guys, I don't think they'll love it. But I don't know essentially. But yeah, the accent. Like anytime I'm in America, I get Scottish, Australian, German. It's like no one ever no one's ever got it right. No one's ever got it right. Um, Yannis, I'm a huge fan of your podcast, History Hyenas. I saw you do a show last time I was in New York when we were allowed to go leave our homes and travel. I was doing some shows in the stand, and you weren't there the night I was on, but I've seen you do stand up a couple of times when I've been over. So I really appreciate you doing the podcast. And I think we can move past not drinking tea, Scottish. I mean, Irish and Scottish are very similar, and like where I live, on a clear day you can see Scotland, so it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. I want to talk about stand up and loads of different things, but have you performed in Scotland, Ireland? Do you ever perform much out of America?
Yeah, well, first I want to apologize because we learn about the different accents over there from Guy Ritchie movies. So, that's the only way we can differentiate. And yeah, wherever you're from in Ireland, it's pretty close to Scottish.
Yeah, it's close. So we have a thing called Ulster Scots, which is like people from Northern Ireland and Scotland have this like dialect, not a language, it's a dialect. And it's one of those things where like nobody really knows how to speak it, but like the grant money for it is through the roof. Like if you're making TV or film and you're saying it's Ulster Scots, you're going to get money for it.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, over here you get money for stuff like if you tell them you're Native American. So that's basically the equivalent of being Native American. Yeah.
It's the equivalent thing.
Yeah. So what was your question again? Because I felt bad about calling you Scottish.
Yeah, you call me a Scottish pikey, which is
yeah.
I mean,
that's like we starting off and you calling me a Turk.
Although, let me just say, I've been to Turkey a couple of times because it's somewhere where people from Ireland go for a cheap holiday. Like we go to Turkey, which seems like really far away for us, but it's not. And I got a shave in Turkey, like a wet shave from like a guy. And it was just the worst experience of my life. I'd never seen like the flame before, like they'll like beat you with a flame, and I'd never seen that before. And the guy was like, doing the cutthroat thing. He had a bit of fire going up my nose. He was hitting my ears. He was stealing my money. It was not a good time. It was not a good time.
Yeah, that's because Greeks, Turks, that part of the world, we're kind of born with a 5 o'clock shadow. So the shave's a little more aggressive. You got to use like an axe to get this off. And fire. Yeah,
I mean, I was asking you if you'd perform much out of America. Like, have you ever performed over my part of the world?
Yes. Well, I've been. I went to Edinburgh one year, and it was the worst experience of my life. We could talk about it. I mean, it was the worst experience of my absolute life, and I just left early. I just left, and I couldn't handle it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Edinburgh is one of those things that a lot of comedians, especially where I'm from, everyone's like, you have to do Edinburgh. Like, you've got to do it. They build it up to be this thing. The weather is always horrendous. Like, it's always so bad. Like, it's in August, but the weather is so bad. The venues are horrific. And unless you're like one of 10 household names, it's not a good time. Like, it is not a good time. I mean, it's good to go over, but especially when I see comedians from like the States or anywhere else, you can tell in their eyes the expectation versus reality is not really matching up. So what year was this?
This was, I can tell you exactly, because it was probably one of the worst. My girlfriend broke up with me, so I was heartbroken, and I didn't want to go, but my manager convinced me that I'd be able to do spots in London and Australia. Right. So he was like, you got to go. And so I went. They listed the wrong venue in the Bible or whatever of shows. And so I was doing shows for like 2-3 people. I got reviewed by like a 20-year-old girl who gave me like, 3 or 4 stars, but then, so that's pretty good, right? Because now, what is it? 4 is the most, but then the review was like horrific. So I was like, you know how unfair it is to review a comedian with 3 people in the audience? There was one time there was a fly buzzing around, and I was like, don't kill that fly. that's sort of a fourth living thing in here looking at me. Yeah. And I asked them if they could all call a friend on their phone and just put it on speakers so we could double the size of the audience. One time it was just me staring at a reviewer. It was just me and a reviewer. And I just did the show for the reviewer. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to, it's more like a reviewers festival just as much as it is a comedy festival.
Oh, for sure. And the thing is, you don't have to you don't have a background in reviewing comedy. You don't have to have any of that. You can just go and review stand-up. Like there's something wrong with that until you get a good review, and then you're like, no, I like the system.
Right. Yeah. It's like when comedians complain about lists until they're on the list. Like, lists are stupid, and then they're on it. You're like, yeah, let me share this on Twitter a little bit.
Yeah, I never asked to find out. The last time I was at the Fringe, I was like, don't ever tell me audience numbers. Just let me walk out, and whatever it is, it'll be. And there was like Saturdays were always good because like you got people coming to just see whatever. And I used to walk out from behind the curtain and kind of see who was. The venue had like 70, and one night it was just quite literally my dad and two American guys that were at the wrong show. And I was like, guys, I'll give you your money back. I apologize. And the American guys were like, no, do the show. So I did like a half-hour version of the hour-long show, and it was like going pretty well. It was okay. And then my dad was just on his phone, and I was like, you can't do that. You're 33% of the audience. And then my dad, like out loud, was like, oh no, I'm not texting. He's like, I'm just trying to get a photo that was something I was talking about like 15 minutes before in the show. And he was like, look, this really did happen. And I was like, no one needs to see this. But I mean, experiences like that in Edinburgh are fun, but it's a long slog. Like a month of doing stand-up in the same venue is a hell of a long time.
Yeah, it's, people who go over there and do it, everyone talks about it like it's, like you're going to boot camp, like it's,
no.
Like you're doing time. It's like you're going to do comedy time. It's like comedy prison. Yeah, I was there about a week, and then, after about the third, fourth show with like a couple people in there, like you said, it was like, I was like, this has no hope. And I got a good review. Then I got one other good review. I got reviewed twice, one by this 20-year-old girl, and then the one of the good ones, the Scotsman or the Guardian or whatever. I don't remember. But I got a good review, but I was like, I'm out of here. I was there with Michael Che's year. He was coming. He was on the Daily Show at the time. He had a publicist. I didn't have any of that. You know what I mean? I just broke up with my girlfriend. I was miserable. I was staying with this comedian, Shane Moss, and I just made his life miserable because I was complaining and I was just heartbroken. When you're heartbroken, you just want to talk about it all the time. I was fucking insufferable. Yeah. So I just hopped on a plane and, I never paid for my housing. So thank you for picking that up, Edinburgh Festival. And I hopped on a plane and came back to the US of A. Crawling on my hands and knees as a failure.
All the accommodation, like Edinburgh's like Harry Potter. Like that's where I think J.K. Rowling like wrote a lot of Harry Potter, and that's
where she wrote her hate speech. That's hate speech.
Yes.
I don't even call it Harry Potter anymore. I call her Harry Criminal. Hate speech, horrible, transphobic bitch.
How annoyed do a lot of people get when someone from the transphobic community says like she's not transphobic? Like Eddie Izzard, I think this week came out as I was about to say came out as transphobic. I definitely don't think he did. He came out as trans, and then he basically said J.K. Rowling isn't trans, guys, and people just didn't like it. In Edinburgh with all that old.
Oh, he said she wasn't transphobic.
Yeah,
because she's not. I mean, she's just saying. It's hilarious because it's like you could totally be in support of trans people, support them, everything. But it's like, it's so funny. It's just human nature. It's like, it's not good enough. You're like, wait, I support everything. I love trans people. I'd marry one. I don't even care. Like, you guys are the best. And they're like, stop calling me trans. I'm a woman. You're like, okay, so then what are you fighting for? What do you mean? You're like, no, I'm not trans. Don't call me trans. That's a slur. You're going, all right. This is getting fucking weird. And I remember I was at the hospital with my wife when she just gave birth to our daughter. And while she was giving birth, I was like, look, I love trans women. And if trans women want the name women, we should give it to them. But then we have to change women to mortal gods, because I saw my wife push a person out of her pussy. And it was one of the craziest experiences I've ever said. And I said, if a trans woman can do that, then she could be a woman. If not, we got to upgrade these people to mortal gods because she just made a person like fucking Jesus, dud.
Two things. One, that's why we should burn down that cafe where J.K. Rowling wrote a lot of.
Burn it down.
They try and confuse you because it's like a Moroccan type cafe. So I don't know if you have a great background, if you have anything against that, and maybe you want to burn it down for other reasons. You got no beef.
I got nothing against anyone except people from Ireland who sound like they're from Scotland to an ignorant American. That's the only people I have something against, and I made that clear at the beginning of this episode.
Last thing on the Fringe is. I lived with because accommodation's so old and so bad, and people pay a lot for shitty accommodation. And me and like 3 friends from Ireland were like renting an old house. And then my friend was like, "Listen, we're getting a pretty good deal here, but we could get an even better deal if we take somebody else in." So I was staying in like the living room, called a living room. And then my mate was like, "Listen, we've got another guy coming in." And he was a 55-year-old magician from New Zealand. And I'm going to be honest, he was called Wes. And one trick he couldn't do was not be a horrific housemate who I'll be honest, slept naked quite a lot of the time in the living room with me. But you mentioned like having a kid. I became a dad like 6 months ago. And I wanted to ask you about. Do you feel like that's changed you as like a comedian at all? This is something I'm asking like friends in stand-up that have had kids.
Yeah, it's I think 2 things. I think one, it's great for your comedy. So it's great for your comedy, especially for us who have parents who text when they, that's you were telling me that story about your dad. I was like, that's why you became a comedian. Yeah. It's like we don't stand on a wood plank and get paid in chicken fingers for the first couple of years because our parents were appropriate and gave us attention, So, we're asking complete strangers to give us affirmation. It's because we missed a few hugs. So having a kid is good, I think, for comedy because it matures you and it takes you outside of yourself. Comedians are so narcissistic, obviously. Attention, look at me. So it's nice to be thinking about somebody else for nature to kick you in the balls and have you thinking about somebody else. So that, and plenty of material comes from that because you're just going to run out of like, hey, I'm scared of this, or I get anxious here, or, I was on another plane the other day going to do a gig and, it gets old. So it opens up a whole new world of experience. It makes you relatable to majority of the population because majority of the population in the world has kids. Too many. I'll be honest, in Asia, in South Asia, a little too many. You guys need to slow it down a little bit. I mean, fucking bomb that place with condoms, please. Just fucking carpet bomb that place with Trojans. So it's good for that. And then as a person, comedy is such a lonely place where you're hanging out in green rooms with other mentally ill people who want attention, and there's a lot of substance abuse and people start drinking to deal with the nerves of performing. It's the number one fear of people to stand up in front of a crowd and ask them to like them. So people start self-medicating, stuff like that. So hanging out with comics is fine when you're in your 20s, a little bit in your 30s, even if you want to do that. But having a family and a life away from comedy, because comedy is one of those lifestyles like music that can just wrap you up. And the next thing you know, you're just snorting lines and, fucking doing 30 days at Edinburgh and hanging out with Glenn Wool while he's standing on a bar peeing somewhere. So and he has a family now. So it's like, it's just that makes you a well-rounded person. It's good for your mental health to have a normal life and a life away from that. Because otherwise, you're 45. Otherwise, you're going to become a 55-year-old magician sleeping naked with a bunch of stand-up comedians in Edinburgh. I was about to say, when you told me 55 comedian looking for a place to crash, I'm like, that's a kid who's not made a lot of good life decisions.
Also, the weirdest thing about it was he had like quite literally, like it was a small living room and he had maybe without exaggeration 500 like toilet rolls. And he said they were part of his act. And then one time we went to see his act without telling him and there was no reference to the toilet rolls. So I'm like, what is he benefiting from, having these?
When was this?
This is like 2010. Maybe he's just ahead of the curve, stocking up.
Yeah. I was about to
that's his ultimate trick.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was the trick. Was he was about 10 years at knowing that there was going to be a fucking shortage of toilet paper. That really let us know how stupid humanity is, right? All the potential we have, and it was like the thing people were most worried about was having enough thin slices of wood to fucking wipe on our assholes. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know about you guys over there, but pasta was the other big thing here that you just couldn't get.
Yeah, pasta was plentiful, but yeah, toilet paper was the thing that was just in short supply. People were stocking up on toilet paper.
Yeah.
I mean, they should have just do what I do. I mean, I just wash my ass in the sink. No toilet paper needed. You hop up there like a fucking baby taking a bath. You put the asshole to the faucet, and you get to scrubbing. Big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the Fringe haven't. I mean, the weird thing I said to myself, I was like, I'm going to do no material about being a father for the first while. Kind of like you're saying about like having almost like a new other life where you have like this family life, and I was like, maybe I'll just keep that separate from comedy. And then in the delivery suite, I was like, that might be a good bit. And then what about this bit from like last week? And then my whole routine is just all about this now. So I mean, for having material, he's paid me back already. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he's done a good job in that sense. But I mean, it is weird. Like I don't like hanging about really that long after shows. And I kind of found like just getting a little bit of a glimpse of the comedy scene in New York when I was over, compared to like LA and a couple of other places I've been. In New York, people just kind of like do their thing and then go. That's a vibe I was kind of getting from being in a few of the clubs, and that suits me. Like that's what I'm. I like to get home 10:30 from gigs here and watch soccer highlights. And it pains me to say soccer, but if I said football, you'd be like, why is a guy in Ireland getting into NFL? That's always a weird look. There are people over here that love NFL, and it weirds me out. I understand why you guys like it, but over here, when people are like, oh, what do you think of the Patriots draft pick? I was like, you don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you know what? It's about time an American said that, you know what, you guys are right, because, the sport you're referring to, you can only use your feet. Yeah. So calling it football is appropriate. Calling another sport where you throw a pigskin and another person catches it while people give each other CTE and brain damage, calling it football just doesn't make any fucking sense. And so, at some point we got to change that thing and just call it CTE ball. Just call it brain injury, the brain injury extravaganza. That's what it should be.
But there is that one guy that kicks it, right? I mean, I don't know a lot about it. Like people over here just kind of watch the Super Bowl.
But guess what? That guy, the kicker, the field goal kicker, and the kicker is a converted soccer player. None of them are football players. Every single one of those guys starts out as a soccer player and then gets drafted or the team uses them, and they're all soccer players, which is hilarious. That's the truth, by the way.
So like, yeah, comedy in New York, I've done maybe like 3 or 4 trips where I've done like a couple of the clubs and seen a little bit of it. And I'd only been to LA before, and I thought like stand up in LA was like the best thing. I was like, these clubs are the best, and they are great. But then whenever I went to New York, I was like, no, this feels like this is really the comedy capital. Obviously pre-COVID and all that kind of thing. But I spent a couple of nights in the stand, and just I was planning to go to other places in between spots, but I just stayed there and like watched all the bills, and that the quality of stand up there seemed like a totally different world, almost LA. Is it like 2 very, very separate stand up scenes, or is it like one big thing?
They're a little separate. I mean, the LA guys have I think they've adapted better to the podcast as the podcast generation. And they deserve credit for that, because I think that's what we're living through right now, is sort of like the digital revolution, and you got to be funny, riffing, and have a podcast. They did really good at that. And there's a lot of funny comedians in Los Angeles. New York has a bunch of killers. There's funny people on both coasts. New York, a little more just stand-up centric. Let me do 8 spots a night. I think a lot of that is just because the scene in New York, enables you to do so many more sets, where in LA, You got to do 1 or 2 a night, pick your spots. Otherwise, you got to drive. The way the city's mapped out, you're driving an hour to another spot. Whereas in New York, you hop in a cab, boom, I'm at another club, 10 minutes. You know, it's a much more dense city. There's a lot more spots, easier to get around. You can do more sets. And there's not as much industry there. So the pay's a little better. They don't bribe you by going, here's $7. And, you know, maybe some agent will see you. But, you know, in their defense, you can also get a door deal and, you know, do it at the door. But yeah, New York has a bunch of killers, and at the Stand or the Cellar or Gotham, those are, you know, New York Comedy Club also became a great club. So those are the 4 great clubs in New York, and I'm pulling for all 4 of them. The Cellar's obviously going to make it because no one owns the spot. I'm pulling for the other 3 to make it through this, you know. So I don't know what the post quarantine world's going to look like, but I know that the Chinese are going to be in charge.
Yeah. I mean, what are their comedy clubs like? For all we know, they could usher in a golden age of comedy.
Yeah, well, you know, they're going to be the top dog after this, you know. I mean, you know, you see New Year's Eve in Wuhan, they were fucking partying. It looked like Times Square. Then you look at Times Square, it looked like the movie Vanilla Sky. It was completely empty. So, I mean, they're doing fine, and they're on the rise. In America, we're past peak. You know what I mean? We were a quick coke bender of an empire. I mean, it was a great fucking night. We partied. We spoke too much. We ate too much. We drank too much. And now, just like, Britain's old empire, it's time to recede a little bit. The sun never set in the British Empire for a long time. And then, and then the sun did set other places because nothing lasts forever. And it's time for us to pack it up and fucking focus on getting clean water in Flint, Michigan.
I didn't know anything about the British Empire. I mean, it's weird. Like, I don't know if you know anything about Northern Ireland. A lot of us that live in Northern Ireland don't, but we're like technically part of the UK, technically part of Great Britain, but we're on the island of Ireland, which makes it a really kind of unique place. And it's something that none of us really know where we live, if you know what I mean. Like, but we pretend that we do, but we're like in the middle of everything. And I didn't know anything about the British Empire until I started watching The Crown a couple of weeks ago. And like, I was totally indifferent to the royals before it. And now I'm like, yeah, 100%. I'm behind them. Yeah, they might be lizards, but they're good lizards. I like everything.
Yeah.
I'm well into it.
So you're Protestant, right? You grew up Protestant, right?
Well, from like a mixed family, but like, yeah, probably more on that. So yeah, you're right. It's Protestant Catholic kind of, and it's a divided, like Belfast, our capital. I presume that you've never been, but Belfast is like one of the only cities in the world that is like divided by like what they call a peace line. But peace line is a very nice way of saying like a metal wall. But like, I think if Trump had called it a peace line, it would be built by now.
Right, that's a good point. You should have called it a peace line.
But a peace line is a nice way to say an 18-foot metal wall. Which is weird that is still a thing. I mean, it's weird that I'm saying it to you and I'm thinking about it and I'm like, that exists now. Like, even in these times, there's still guys like, no, that's still important that we have this up. But the weird thing is there's a door that like, I'm not making this up. There's a door where you can just walk through, but it closes at 9 o'clock at night. Like, all of a sudden, until 9 o'clock, these guys can keep a lid on it. But they can't be trusted after 9 to not kind of go and start throwing punches. I mean, it's weird.
That's so weird. Yeah. So really weird. You can go to the Catholic. You can go to the Catholic part. I
mean, that is kind of the more radical parts of it. But like, yeah, it's certain areas are divided, but really it's not really a big thing anymore. But it's still symbolic having those walls. Still important to like kind of the older generation. But like, I mean, literally all my best friends, everyone's in like mixed marriages. Nobody even thinks of it as that. That used to be a big thing growing up. People would be like, "Are you Protestant or Catholic?" Now it's kind of not an issue, and there is trouble. But it's like there's 400 guys that are still really into it, but they're so into it that it keeps it going.
Right.
Like, they love it. Like, they really, which is nice to see in a way. It's nostalgic, but like, I did a buster of Belfast with a friend who was over from somewhere else, and it was weird physically seeing, like, it's like being at the zoo kind of and looking down at people in these divided places. Like, tourists love it, and speaking of the Chinese, like they love it.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah, I would
really,
love
really
to go. I'm curious. I want to see that. Yeah. So now people interact no problem for the most part. It's like
yeah,
nobody
yeah,
really cares. Yeah.
yeah. It's one of those things where like we're still doing it a bit, but it's for that tourism money. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
like as soon as Sippers, let me interrupt the podcast really quickly. Just tell you about our sponsor. We're sponsored by Manscaped, manscaped.com. Start the year. You got to start the year right. A lot of people are like, new year, new me. And listen, if you got fresh balls, if you use Manscaped, if you use Lawnmower 3.0, it doesn't need to be a new year, new you. Just keep doing what you're doing, honey bun. But if you're one of these guys that's coming into 2021 grizzly down below, 2021 in for you. You got to get with the times. Manscaped, they're bringing sexy back. You got to get involved. Producer Dan and I, long-term users of the Manscaped products, the Lawnmower 3.0, the wipes, all of it. You know, and then Big Mike behind the camera here, one of the Christmas presents I gave him, which he pointed out I did not pay for because it was a sponsored product. You know, we got him sorted out with some Manscaped gear, and I'm looking at a new man. I'm looking at a new man with his jeans off, and I just want to say he's done a great job there. Pull those up. His weeds are whacked as well. We got the weed whacker, which is for like your nose hair and your ear hair, because that's what Manscaped is. It just takes care of all your grooming needs. And Big Mike, listen, I got the weed whacker, and I'm not a guy who needs my weeds whacked. I don't need my weeds whacked at all, right? My weeds have been whacked since I've been born. Like maybe when I'm like 70, I'll call this door and be like, "Can I have that weed whacker?" But he is a young man who needs it ASAP. So he got his weeds whacked, and he needed his weeds whacked. Dan, you whack your weeds? Regularly. Okay, so you go to manscaped.com, use code TEAWITHME for 20% off and free shipping. Listen, everyone's talking about Manscaped at the minute. It's below the belt grooming. Start 2021 right. Get yourself sorted down there. Whack your weight. Back to the pod. As soon as the
You guys
last
dressed
bus,
up. They put on like, you know, IRA bomber hats, and they fucking like the way we act out the Civil War. You guys act out. You act out that the animosity.
yeah, I mean the wall. The thing is, when the last bus goes, the wall kind of lifts up like a garage door, and then everyone just kind of kisses. They get in, they shake hands. I mean, no, it's weird. Like, yeah, all this stuff happened in like there's a battle that happened in 1690 called the Battle of the Boyne, and that's kind of what's sparked the tension and what's kept the wall up, and that's crazy that happened in 1690. And I think the guy was Dutch. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where like people just need something to be into. You know?
I know it's we're a strange animal, and a lot of the things we really care about. You know, it's funny when you're on your deathbed, or you think you're on your deathbed, you're going, "Wow, this is a cosmic joke," because we're all fucking swinging at ghosts.
Yeah,
Everyone's swinging at ghosts and projecting on everybody, and it's like it's all internal, guy. You know, it's all internal. When you're on your deathbed, you're like, "Wow, that was a waste of time," and that's what makes it so funny. Is that this is all a waste of time, and it means nothing. But we put so much importance on what ghosts do you believe in, and kill each other over it. And it's hilarious. I mean, you know, it's a cosmic joke. I think this is totally a reality show for aliens.
If I'm honest, if it stopped, part of me would miss it. You know what I mean? Like it's been horrendous for a long time. But like I think there's part of us that's like, no, it's nostalgia.
Yeah. Because what would we do if we didn't kill each other? You know, like
no.
You have to. If you're not killing someone, you want to watch someone killing someone.
Yeah. I mean, we're the example of you have to find something, because like everybody here is white. Everybody's white. Like the Protestant Catholic thing, like they're both forms of Christianity, I suppose. So I don't know anything about religion really, but they're both forms of Christianity. And like everybody, like it's weird when people fight here, because you can't tell if you don't like the person. You know what I mean? Like you've got to ask a lot of questions before you're like, "That's my enemy." You know, you've got to do a screener basically before you find out if this person is your enemy. So it would seem weird to you to see us fighting, because you're like, "But they all look exactly the same. They talk the same." But
it just lets you know that mankind isn't. It's not so much that mankind is racist as that mankind is just shitty. I mean, we kill whatever's closest. You can't whatever's closest you're going to kill. I mean, World War II, I mean, millions and millions of quote unquote white Europeans killed millions and millions of other white fucking Europeans and white people from the Caucasus and Eastern Europe. And you kill whatever's closest. Whatever you can get your hands on, you're going to destroy. And that's what makes us so beautiful.
Yeah, like World War II, World War II is bittersweet for me because my grandfather was
because Hitler lost and you're still upset about it.
Yeah, my grandfather, my grandführer.
I've never heard someone say World War II was kind of bittersweet. You know, I mean, it was sweet because we did a lot of cleaning, but you know, it's bitter because we lost.
Well, my grandfather fought for the Allies, but he never talked about it, which, like, as a kid is just a major disappointment. You want to hear it, you know what I mean? Like, you want to hear a little bit, just never give it up.
You know what that means? That means your grandpops did some stuff that keeps him up. When you see your grandpop shaking or having cold sweats, that means anyone who's did some real shit. Like my dad never talked about Korea. My dad fought in Korea. He never talked about it. He hated war movies. That lets you know he did some shit that he just makes him a little uncomfortable. And because the guys who are like, you know, driving people around, they're like pushing papers. Those guys will just be like, they'll just make up stories and tell you all you want about. You're like, you didn't see real war because your mouth is open too much.
Yeah. Can I ask do you guys learn about Ireland, like in your school system? Like, do you know anything about Ireland? Like, what's the perception?
Of course, sure. Yeah, I mean, Conor McGregor. Yeah, Conor McGregor. You know, no, there's so many Irish immigrants in New York that Irish culture, you know, the pubs and kind of, the priests getting their hands on little boys. That happens to us too. You know, that's happened to us too. There's a lot. We got a lot of Catholics, and there's a lot of boys who, you know, blacked out. They blacked out going to get robes, and you know, so we get a little bit of that. But Ireland, we don't know too much about it except for that there's some great golf courses out there. The people are nice, and Guinness has iron in it, so it's the healthiest beer. And that's just about it. And your food is fucking horrendous. That we know. Yeah,
100%.
And you serve it on newspaper plates.
Yep. No, just newspaper. Yeah. And we're all about potatoes. Obviously, we had the famine, so like we make up for it now. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Well, on our podcast, we call Irish people potato monkeys.
Yeah, it's a weird one because you joke about the famine to the wrong person, and they don't like it, and you're like, I think if we can laugh at any horrendous thing in history, it's the famine.
Well, you know, you got to laugh at everything, or else you don't survive this world emotionally. Like, I'm a Greek, and I refer to Greeks. In America, Greeks own diners, restaurants. So I just call us diner monkeys. You know. So, and then Italians are sauce monkeys. You know. So we just. Because we're let's be honest, like the majority of us are barely sliding into being human. Like it's a play at the plate in baseball. They got to go to an instant replay and we get like one finger in, we're barely human. I mean, we're basically closer. I'm not talking about the Elon Musks and those guys. Those guys are like fully human and we're just barely making it. Like we have more in common with chimpanzees than we do with Elon Musk. Like we could communicate better. If you go to a bar and watch the way normal people act, you'd be like, Elon Musk sees that, and he's like, this is a room full of chimpanzees, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he he's like an exemplary guy, but then he really let himself down when he called that submarine guy a pedo. Do you remember this?
Yes.
I mean, you have to allow the guy to have a moment like that. You know, like he has so many thoughts that at some point there's going to be a little bit of a jam in the system and something like that is going to come out. I mean, that, again, should never have gone to court because that was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, guys like that, you gotta cut them a little slack. It's like they were born with such a gift, but because this is such a hilarious planet and there's no yin without a yang, it's like you got to cut him a little slack. You know, he's gonna. Who knows? There's a dark side somewhere we don't know about. You know, it's like even look at a guy like Michael Jackson, all that talent that he had, and like.
What do
You
you mean? I
know,
don't think Michael had a dark side. What
yeah.
are you
I
trying to
mean,
say?
Michael Jackson, you had to feed him boys, like little young boys, to keep. It's like tokens. You just kind of you
How,
put it in the jukebox and he dances. But
how
that
funny?
it's like,
How
yeah, you got
funny
to
would
feed
it
him
be if that?
children.
How funny would it be if that rumor had never come to Ireland? I was like, no, I have no idea.
You're like, what are you talking about? I
The
heard
king of
Michael
pop.
Jackson was a great. Yeah, I mean, what are you talking about? He was married to Brooke Shields, right? The best joke about you ever heard the Cat Williams joke about Michael Jackson?
Oh, the thing that stands out for me more than that is the green. Is it like a velvet jacket? He's wearing like a green suede
Yeah,
jacket in the thing, but I love Cat Williams. I love the fact that I heard on a podcast, I can't remember which one, that like he was so like out of it and paying so many people for jokes that in the Comedy Store he like handed someone $500 but they hadn't written anything for him. He's like, yeah, that's for. And then the other thing, of course, is that video when he got choked out by a 12-year-old boy
yeah,
playing
yeah,
soccer. Playing soccer.
yeah. I mean, yeah. The entertainment business. It's something about it makes people lose their minds. I don't know what it is. Probably the lifestyle, but yeah. I mean, if he wrote that joke or somebody else did, it was a brilliant joke about like, I'm into women, so I have these things that women like. If I was into kids, what would I have in my house? I don't know. A zoo, a circus with some. I mean, it's just hilarious.
Yeah, he's such a funny guy. I mean, I only just like started watching like some of his specials about 2-3 years ago, and then I look back and I was like, he put out a lot of stuff. I mean, there was a period for about 3 years where the guy was putting out a special a week, but it was good.
Yeah, yeah, man.
I like his hair, I like his voice.
Oh yeah, he's an interesting dude. He's a little tiny squeak. He's a short kid.
Yeah. Have
And
you
to
done a
answer your
show?
question, I went to
Sorry, I was going to ask if you've ever done a show with him before.
I've never done a show with him. I didn't do it, and I didn't finish your question from before because I did spend about 5 years. I went all over Sweden, Norway, Denmark. I did some TV in Denmark, and I absolutely loved touring Scandinavia. That was a lot of fun. Great. I'm sure you done it yet? Like they speak English over there. It's great.
Yeah, it's one I've been told a lot about, like Reykjavik, especially. People are like, "There's a good comedy scene in Reykjavik." Like, here's the thing: where I live, like we have a population of like I think it's 1.1 million. We don't have any weekend comedy clubs, which is crazy.
Wow.
So friends of mine, it's like more convenient for friends of mine to be like, want to try some stuff out. Probably going to head over to Reykjavik here and just see what's what.
Right.
But yeah, apparently Scandinavia. Like I've done Paris and Amsterdam, but I've done way more spots in the States than I have in Europe. Paris,
Right.
Amsterdam. I think that's it.
Right. Right. Sorry, I got a call. Yeah, I mean, it was great. I did it for about 5 years. I toured with the Swedish comedian Magnus Bettner, and he's quite popular. So I was a little spoiled by the treatment, but I mean, the shows are great. They're very smart people. They clap a lot, very cerebral, Northern Europeans. Great, beautiful people, obviously. They're good looking folks. And it was, it was a lot of fun. And Norway, Finland, I did a lot of Finland. And that was fun. That was like in 2008 to like 2012. I did that. Like every year I'd go for like a month and do Latter Club in Norway and stuff like that. And but yeah, I got to get over. The only thing comic I know from Ireland, I think that I know personally is Des Bishop, and he's American.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, he was. I know. I think I'm right in saying he lives in the States now, but like he was I mean, he would have been more. He's based in Dublin, so like on Irish TV, like Southern Ireland TV, he was huge and still would be now. But we wouldn't have got his shows. But he would have like come on headline some of our comedy clubs, and yeah, it was always and ran a great comedy club, the International, which had like no microphone. It was in like a loft type venue, no microphone, like 70 people, and like they had like the biggest stars, like people that came to Dublin for like arena shows would drop in there because they knew Des and do like 10-minute spots, and yeah, so good. Does this kind of time of not really getting to do stand up, or like getting to do some stuff, but not like club date, has it made you like change your like ambitions at all? What I mean by that is there like something you now want to do because of this, where you're like, oh, I really want to do this project that maybe you put on the back burner before, but now like it's a passion thing? Like I really enjoy finding out from people, like, is there like a project you've sat on and you're like, fuck it, I've got to go and I've got to try this.
Yeah, well, we really started focusing on the podcast, and you know, we were fortunate enough to have it because you know, live shows have been scarce, and that started to really flourish. We've really flourished during the pandemic because people have been looking for comedy, and it's been great. So we focused on that, and I just started my solo podcast, which I've been sitting on for a long time, and I think
Today?
the first episode came out yesterday. Yeah,
Okay.
Long Days. It's called Long Days with Yanni Long Days. And I had Tim Dillon on as a guest real quick. And so that was something I've been sitting on for a long time, just kind of like me ranting about stuff. And so that was it. And the podcast, we just focused more on that. And yeah, I can't wait for live stand-up to come back. Just miss it so much and miss the live audience so much. I did, I think, 5 or 6 shows over the summer outdoors, and that was great. And I was real rusty and nervous. It felt like I was starting all over again. You know, it was wild.
Yeah, I think I had the same thing, and but it was like enjoyable nerves where you're like, I don't know if I can do this, but let's just have fun. Like when you first start, it like reminds you of that kind of nerves. With History Hyenas, like, do you think you guys will get on the road? Would you like to do live? I think live podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think, I think that's you know, that's the new thing. I think with stand-up, you do maybe a little stand-up, a little podcast. Live podcasts are so fun. Right before it all closed down, we had sold out shows in like New York and Connecticut, and we already did 2 in New York, and we're starting to sell some tickets. People were coming out. Fans are great, and yeah, the live shows were incredible, and we were just getting set to, you know, just get on a tour and just have fun doing it. And so when this thing opens up, yeah, can't wait to do History Hyenas live.
I think I can't remember how I got into it, but maybe it was about a year ago. But it's like, it's the only one genuinely that I don't dip in and out of. You know, like some podcasts, I'll maybe let a month go by, I'll catch up on a couple, or maybe leave a few. But it's one where I think you've really tapped into that thing of like, you don't want to miss it. It's almost like you got to follow it week by week, because you know, you might just talk a little bit about something happened the week before, so I got to go back and listen to that. And the concept of it, I mean, you know, History of Hyenas, you guys talk a little bit about history, but not to the point where someone like me who doesn't know anything about history feels alienated. I think it's a brilliant podcast, and just, it's one of those ones where it's like, it almost feels like you're in the room a bit. Like there's a lot of fun happening, and it just feels like you're there. I think for me, it's the number one at the minute. I really enjoy it.
Oh man, I appreciate that very, very much. Yeah, it's a huge compliment coming from you. I appreciate it. Yeah, we just have a great time. You know, we're close friends, and we really have a lot of fun. So I think that may probably translates to people who are listening. And I think that's the format is a podcast makes you feel like you're listening to a conversation. You listen to people for hours and hours and hours, and you kind of feel like you know the person. Like I've had people, me and Chris were standing on the street one day, and this guy came up to him and just started he touched us, like, you know, and he was like, "What's up, fellas?" And we're like, "Who the fuck are you?" And I could see in his face, he was a little taken aback, and he had a moment where he realized, like, "Oh yeah, these guys don't know me, but I felt like they're my friend." So he just rolled up to us, and we were like, "Who are you?" So yeah, it's a lot. You get to know someone, like, you know, probably so much about me because, you know, and Chris, because, you know, you listen for so long and you hear so many things and things we're going through, family, all that stuff. And that's the new thing. That's, you know, that's the new kind of TV. That's the new entertainment medium, especially for comedy. I mean, people are into it, and it fits well with modern life because you can do it while you do other things. We have such a short attention span now. You can do it while you're at the gym. You can do it while you're in the car. You can do it while you're painting, whatever. You can do it, whatever. So you can add it into something you're already doing and kind of listen in and laugh instead of just like, you know, people don't have the attention span yet. And it's got to be like a really good show like The Crown or Queen's Gambit to like sit down and watch. Like people don't like flip around anymore. They want to watch what they want to watch. And if it's not good, they move on quick.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great time for you to come on this, launching your podcast. When you look in those analytics, you're going to see 8 fans in Ireland. You're going to see 8 listens in Ireland. And hey, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Hey, man, I'll take 8 Irishmen. You know, fucking, I'll take them. I love the Irish.
anytime I see like a weird, like, cause I think especially when you first start doing a podcast, like you're really into like, the first time I was doing podcasts years ago, I was like, 100 people listen. Let's see where in the world they are, and you'll always see like one guy in Yemen, one guy in Poland, and you're like, I'd love to know how. Was it a mistake, or is there just a guy who's just all in? He's all in.
Yeah, there's just one guy who's like sneaking off somehow, setting up some fake Wi-Fi, somehow he's taking Wi-Fi out of the air from a satellite. He's so smart, and he's just like one guy in Somalia is just kind of listening, going, my girl's a piece.
One guy in Somalia just listening on the ship's radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Yannis, like you said about just one final point, like you said about feeling like you guys. It's so hard in my head. I have to keep being like, I've actually never met Yannis before, because like the way you talk with friends is totally different to the way you talk with someone you've just met. So, but I think that is a good thing. But then there's times where I was like, oh, you just got to rein it in like a little bit. But I think that is the great thing about the History Hyenas. And your podcast came out yesterday. We'll fire a link in below. As I say, you just keep an eye on those analytics, and you're welcome. You're welcome for that.
Thank you for whatever 5 to 8 people we get to listen. I appreciate it. And so you just started this again?
Well, no, we've been doing this podcast for just under a year. Started in February, and I mean, the blessing of lockdown has been like you get to chat to people that you wouldn't normally get to talk to. Like I come from a small place called Hollywood in Northern Ireland, which you were talking about golf. Rory McIlroy's from there, like one of the top golfers. And Jamie Dornan, the actor from like 50 Shades of Grey and The Fall and some other great things. So it's been really good to like get people from here that are big names that wouldn't normally do podcasts. Suddenly they're like, yeah, why not? So it's been really good. Like it's really, really grown. And I think now people here, podcasts are only becoming like a real big thing here, where like your mom and dad will know what a podcast is now, where they wouldn't have up until like last year. So we're getting there.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem. Yannis, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Also, you have a brilliant special called Blowing the Light, which is on YouTube, which is great.
So it's on YouTube. All you got to do is Google my name or Blowing the Light or Yannis Pappas Comedy. And my podcast is Long Days, Yanni Long Days, just Yannis Pappas Comedy. You know how to Google Yannis Pappas. Everything will come up. Of course, History Hyenas with me and Chris DiStefano. And that's really it, man.
Yeah, we don't have Google here yet, but we are 2025. I think we're getting it, so we're pretty.
What do you have? What do you use?
We're AOL guys. AOL.
Oh, you still AOL dial-up? Yeah.
Yeah. Lycos. Do you ever get Lycos?
No.
No, Lycos was a thing here, and Ask Jeeves, of course. But Jeeves is. Did you have Jeeves?
We have Jeeves. Yeah, you could always ask Jeeves, but nobody
does. I think Jeeves is shielding at the minute.
Yeah, Google has just taken over, and people don't even think about that it's a search engine. You almost feel like it's the internet. Google just feels like the internet.
Yeah, no, Jeeves unfortunately has died of COVID, but appreciate it. Come over here. Let's do the bus tour. It'll be a good time. Thank you very much.
Definitely, man.
For doing the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it, man.
Cheers, Yannis. Bye.
Cheers, brother.